What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
That's a really good question, and not one that's easily answered. To really understand how we got here in the Big 12, we have to go back to the beginning of three different conferences: the Missouri Valley Conference, the Big Six Conference, and the Southwest Conference. The Missouri Valley Conference began in 1907 and still exists today. The Missouri Valley Conference was once home to 5 members of the current Big 12: Kansas, Kansas State, Iowa State, OU, and Oklahoma State. At the same time, it was home to 2 former Big 12 schools, Nebraska and Missouri. In 1928, most of the state schools split off of the MVIAA, Missouri Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Association, to form what would become the Big 8. They chose to keep the official name MVIAA. Don't ask me why. They were unofficially known as the Big Six, however it took several years for this to become the actual name of the conference. The schools that were left behind added a couple more schools to form the MVC, Missouri Valley Conference. Oklahoma State, which was called Oklahoma A&M back then, was one of the schools left behind by the big boys. It's very interesting that they managed to find a way to play OU every year back then despite being in different conferences. Yet today, with the exact same thing happening, they say it's impossible to continue Bedlam and it's all OU's fault. But I digress. Both conferences claimed the history going back to 1907. The Big Six added Oklahoma A&M to make it the Big Seven, and then later Colorado to make it the Big Eight. A lot of people over the years referred to it as Oklahoma and the Seven Dwarves. So as you can see, conference realignment is really nothing new. The Big Eight enjoyed several decades of success in football, basketball, and baseball. But the football, the glorious football. As a Sooner fan, this part of the program's history always puts a big smile on my face. Overall, the Big Eight claimed 11 national championships. 6 of them belonged to OU. The Big Eight also claimed 7 Heisman trophies. 3 of those belonged to Oklahoma. It was also during the Big Eight era that Bud Wilkinson's Sooners achieved the legendary 47-game winning streak that is still the record today. For many years, the Oklahoma-Nebraska game, which was played on Thanksgiving Day or Thanksgiving weekend, was the de facto Big Eight championship game. Everybody in America watched this game. The Big Eight champion was awarded a trip to the Orange Bowl in sunny Miami, Florida. It became a tradition to throw oranges onto the field when you knew your team had the game wrapped up. I have to admit I've done this myself. Now for the third conference we have to talk about. Why were Oklahoma, Oklahoma A&M, and Arkansas ever in the Southwest Conference? Well, OU and OSU made a quick exit pretty early on, but Arkansas hung around and they were pretty successful for quite a while. The Texas Longhorns are still hated by the Arkansas Razorbacks, so between being enticed by bigger dollar signs in the Southeast Conference and probably just being sick and tired of that UT arrogance, the Hogs left the Southwest Conference in 1991. This turned out to be a death blow to the already struggling league. In 1996, the Big Eight took in 4 refugee schools from the now dead Southwest Conference: Baylor, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, and Texas. Don't get me wrong, the Big Eight didn't just do this out of the goodness of their hearts. The state of Texas was then and still is extremely fertile recruiting ground. Now Tex, being a Texan, probably has a fairly different perspective on the Southwest Conference and its history, and hopefully we'll get him to tell us what that is pretty soon. So they set up the new conference called the Big 12 to have North and South divisions, with the champions of each division meeting in a conference championship game. Splitting the teams into North and South divisions meant that Oklahoma and Nebraska would no longer play each other every year. This really is a shame, but who's to blame? If you ask any Husker, Arkansas, Texas A&M, or even a lot of other fans of college football who's to blame for any college football problems, the answer would probably be the Texas Longhorns. There seemed to be some animosity between Nebraska and Texas from the beginning, but everybody got along well enough for a while, and the Big 12 enjoyed great success. The peace was broken when the University of Texas announced that they were launching their own TV channel for all of their sports called the Longhorn Network. Seemingly everyone in the country wondered, who do they think they are? To which UT fans everywhere said, we're Texas. Well, that was enough to send the Big Red right over the edge. Nebraska left the Big 12 for the Big 10. Colorado agreed that enough was enough and bolted for the Pac-10, now 12. Missouri and even Texas A&M agreed and joined the SEC. They were all gone by 2012. This left the Texas-loving Big 12 in a pickle, since now they only had 8 teams. They ended up adding 2 schools, but not 4, which was a really bad look. TCU had wanted in from the beginning, and adding them made sense, but adding West Virginia has always seemed pretty odd. The perceived weakness of the 10-team Big 12 as a Power 5 conference has been very detrimental from a recruiting standpoint. And when you're one of the biggest fish in the game and you find yourself in an increasingly small pond, you do what you got to do. You really can't blame Oklahoma and Texas for wanting to reach a higher station in the game any more than you can blame any other school for moving conferences. When the Sooners and Longhorns decided that it was in their best interest to join the SEC, it once again put the Big 12 in a bind. This time they were able to add enough schools to actually add up to 12. I think adding BYU, Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF is great for these universities, and it puts the Big 12 in a better place than it was. However, for someone to say that the team that won 14 of your conference's 26 titles, a national championship, and 4 Heisman trophies didn't make an impact on your conference, that's beyond ridiculous. Somebody actually said this about Oklahoma at Big 12 Media Days. Anyway, that's the condensed story of the Big 12 Conference. I'm betting that this 1 year of the Big 12 with 14 teams is going to be a wild ride, and we can't wait for you to go with us.